I kind of fell in love with the piano, I have to say, after doing this. So I had a bunch of piano lessons before we started shooting and all throughout the 4 or 5 months of shooting. And yeah, like I'm still taking lessons now because I really fell in love with it. I'm not very good at it, but I really enjoy it.
I mean, when you go into something like that, and again, like your role isn't necessarily somebody who's in band, like your character Elliot doesn't play until basically like, he plays a little bit off and on at the beginning, and then kind of stays it for the end. What is your approach? Like, how well do you have to learn that to feel comfortable with the scenes and to feel good about going into those moments where you're by the piano or on the piano or talking about music?
Man, that was the most stressful part, I gotta say, man. Like I mean, it's amazing how much goes into it. So even like the posture when I'm sitting at the piano and like being able to like sit in the posture that seems relaxed, have my shoulders be relaxed, my hands to be, relaxed and ready. And then to try and act at the same time is a tall order.
As Randy said, it's been a very long time since I've been up here, and I won't lie, I'm more than a little bit nervous.
So those were the toughest days, I have to say. And then, as is the nature with like TV and jazz, apparently, there are times when I would be like working on a particular song that I knew I had to play a little bit of, say for 3 weeks. And then a few days before they say, yeah, we decided we're going to change it up. We're going to do a different song. Say, okay, cool. So then I'm going to spend the next 3 days trying to cram this little bit, into my head. And then we turn up on set and they'd be like, yeah, so we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be in a different key. Okay, you ready? And I'm like, different key? What does that mean? So then Randy Kerr would come over and he'd like transpose it on the spot and be like, yeah, it's easy. You just play all different notes than what you learned. I'm like, oh God. So it was challenging at times, but at the end, man, I walked away from it with a real appreciation and a love for it and a desire to want to learn more.
But yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit too about kind of the world of the Eddy, because that opening shot in the first episode, it's a long take. A lot of the show is built with this kind of roaming camera where it's just pivoting and moving and the verite style. Does that help you kind of get a sense of character, like the fact that you can live in place and move around and kind of just, I know there's a lot of blocking and a lot of specificity involved, but does being in like the club itself and working in that way help you at all, or is that just a challenge to master the whole thing?
It really helped me a lot, man. I didn't know what to expect, going into it, but when we shot that opening scene, I feel like I really started to understand what the language of the show was. So for me, one of the things that was really important is that we feel that Elliot, that this is his home, that he knows every inch of this place, this club, I mean, and the people in it, he knows them, and and is like very, very comfortable there. And to juxtapose that with how he is when he's outside of the club, that he feels quite trapped when he's like out on his own. So when we shot that opening scene, Damien was like, we would do a bit of it, and I could just see him in the DP kind of like chasing us around, and I kept thinking, man, maybe I'm walking too fast, or I'm moving too much, or we got to just kind of. And I say, hey man, do you want me to slow it down a bit? He's like, no, keep doing it. We'll follow you. We will follow you. And so literally that whole thing ended up, they chased me around basically for the first 2 episodes. The poor DP, Eric Gauthier, was exhausted by the end. But I think that's what Damien wanted, was just this sense of like, life is happening and, the camera's just going to try to grab what it can. So for me, it was really liberating to not feel kind of like stuck to a certain, limited geography or certain rhythms, that we could kind of play and improvise a bit.
How much blocking was involved? Like, how much did they try to map out the movements of where you were going to go versus like you just know what the scene is and what you have to do within it?
Well, in the opening scene was pretty well orchestrated, just in terms of like the movements, because he wanted it to all be like feel like one continuous shot. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty accurately mapped out. But I would say for the most of the time outside of that, I feel like it was pretty organic. I mean, we would rehearse it once or twice in the space, and then sort of whatever we came up with to do, it's what he wound up getting. And then as that evolved, the more we did, you do a scene over and over, it sort of takes on its own life and evolves. He wasn't super strict about making us stick to it. He would say, okay, well, let's keep on going in that direction. And he would just find a way to grab it. So I think that helps the show, helps it to feel like alive, and a bit improvise, and it definitely helped the actors and the musicians who were actors too, who were being asked to play some, pretty complicated scenes. It helped them, I think, to feel more comfortable and more that they can sort of just bring themselves.
Well, for you as a trained theater actor, how does something like this compare to that? Like, how does this compare to a stage show where, you just have to keep going throughout the whole thing, and this has the freedom where you have a little bit more room to move and actual movement within the scene? Like, did that training help you? Did you feel like it was a little bit like that at all, or was it just a whole new experience?
No, it actually, I'm glad you asked that. It actually felt very familiar to me, coming from the theater. It really, I think the training really helped me in that case. I often find it difficult when I'm on set and, when things get really, really rigid. Like I'm not an actor who operates well under those kinds of strictures. There are actors who, need to be told, like, do this here, pick up the cup on that line, and then cross on this line, and then, say it like this and slam the door or whatever. And that makes me crazy. I'm more like, all right, tell me where we are, what the situation is, and let us just play it, and we'll find it, So in this case, it felt a lot more like theater in that respect. And then I think the interesting thing that does too is that it, on some subconscious level, I think forces the actor to like up their game a little bit, because if going into work that day that it's up to you more or less to come up with, what the scene is going to be or how it's going to feel. You know what I mean? Like, if you have to bring something to the table, then you really are inclined, I think, to do your homework and know that what you're bringing is like on the level. You can't just side up to it and wait for somebody else to tell you what to do. You got to like step forward and take a risk. And I think that challenge, like feeling that level of like, all right, we're all about to dive into this thing, just makes everybody kind of step it up a little bit, which I love.
Well, one of the things that I really loved about your performance in particular was just the idea that, I feel like anybody I've seen or know who's kind of a small business owner or who works in something that especially, does like kind of nightlife entertainment or has to put on something like that, especially as a club owner, they're stressed all the time because things keep popping up. And for Elliot, every time he gets a moment to talk to his daughter or just, have a breather to explore a song or do one thing or the other, he gets a phone call with an emergency that he has to get pulled away from. And it's like watching you get frustrated over and over and over again. It never got repetitive. Like, it always felt fresh every time that happened.
Of all the nights, she's off, the crowd's off.
You're ready to become a GIF. Like, all of those reaction shots of you are just going to be GIFs everywhere. People will be like, God damn it.
Well, man, I'm glad to hear you say that they didn't feel like they got stale, because that was one of the challenges. Yeah, he's constantly running into walls, and I didn't want it to feel like it was the same moment over and over and over again. And at the same time, each of those things has a different impact on him, and you want to honor the reality of what those challenges are. But I think it was about like knowing where we had to end up, knowing that we had to, tease this sort of thing out for a while. So not like firing all the bullets on the first shot. And so I think that's part of it. And then, the specificity of each of those things, being really clear about what it is that he's frustrated about or angry about or whatever that is. And then getting back to the active part of it. Like, it's okay to give him a moment to feel frustration, but then like, what does he do with that frustration? And I think for me, that was kind of key, that he keeps trying to take action in some way. It sort of felt like, in a weird, like roundabout way. And I know this sounds bizarre, but I did Othello a couple of years ago. And when I was working on this, I thought about that part because, in that show, he gets some really bad news early in the play. And every time he tries to like work out whether or not this news is true or like what his plan of action should be, someone comes in and interrupts him with either some more bad news or something he has to do, or, so he doesn't ever get a moment to just breathe and think and work it out, and as a result, he gets swept off into this thing and ends up making some really, really bad decisions. And only at the end does he realize, obviously, that, that he's made those bad choices. So in some ways, I think Elliot gets caught up in that same thing where he's constantly like on 10 and like spinning plates.
I wanted to ask, because, obviously you've worked with some great directors overall, but with TV so far, working with Steven Soderbergh on The Nick, now working with Damien on this. I was just curious, in that regard, did you pick up anything in particular from each of them that helped you with the speed of television or with the medium of television, like the tight framing or the way they shoot that like expanded things, or I guess just kind of in general, was there anything that you really took away from those experiences on The Nick and now on this?
Good question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that they both really have a lot of trust in their actors and in the crew. Steven, I remember when we were doing The Nick, he would often come in and, when we would rehearse the scene, he would sometimes come in and say, okay, well, what do you guys want to do? What do you guys want to do with the scene? And then Clive and I would kind of, or whoever it was sitting, we kind of like figure it out for ourselves. And he'd watch us kind of put it together. And then he might come in and say, well, actually, let's move that to there and this to here. And, but then there'd be other times we would rehearse it and he said, great, let's shoot it. And the cameras would be up before you know it. And what that said to me was that, man, he really trusts us. He really knows that we know these characters and that we've done our preparation. And similarly with Damien, I think he has a similar trust of actors. A lot of times when Mandela and I were doing scenes that on the page were good, but we had we rehearsed a lot, she and I, so we would have some ideas about things that we thought might make it a bit more interesting. So Damien would say, yeah, try it, go for it, and we would end up doing, for some scenes, there would be like a big improvisation, you know what I mean? And I think, again, that like he trusted us in that way, for me as an actor, that means everything. It kind of goes back to the thing I said before about like not liking, I don't love being told like, do this, this way. So it takes all the fun out of it.